February 26th. And it's the Ways and Means Committee. We are going to do, this morning, we're going to do a review of our regional assessment district language, a review of our non-homestead residential tax classification language. Both have been sort of updated with guidance from the tax department. My goal in both of those conversations is for us to get as far as we can to finalizing the language. So it's really like any final work can happen over next week and we can be ready to go when we get back. I still don't know what the bill will be that they'll be in. And then we have a bill from OPR, H588, that we're going to pick up and maybe vote on. And H802 was on the agenda, but JFO and Legislative Council are going to are making some clarifications to it. And we're going to actually pick it up. We canceled the testimony and we're going to pick that up after break. And then after lunch, we're going to go through the long list of pieces that are in the miscellaneous tax bill, similar process to what we're doing on RADs and property tax classifications, really just like checking off what's okay and what still needs work. If we check off something is okay, I'm not planning further discussion on it until we vote on the full bill. And Rural Vermont sent an email, I think, to everyone. Yes?
No.
Nope. Okay. Anyway, Rural Vermont sent an email about some challenges that they had to some of the current use ag language. And so we're inviting them in to testify as part of that testimony block. And I think we'll find out more about that then. Oh, Rural Vermont is they're like one of the main farming advocacy organizations.
Several rural.
Yeah, no, it's
Showing them
yeah,
what's farming.
yeah, farming.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just rural, like that's the whole phrase, and it's the farming people.
I didn't know if it was a capital R or a little r.
Thank you. It's capital R, capital V. I'll forward the email around. I didn't notice that no one else got it. I'm also hearing from a national expert on the federal education stuff. And then at 2:15, we are picking up a bill that we received from the House Natural Resources Committee on producer responsibilities. And that's it. It's going to be quite a day. We're going to have so much fun. Yes.
PSA, yesterday I asked why a colleague's committee wanted to go the route that they went, and you said it wasn't appropriate for alleged counsel to answer that. You were correct.
Thank you, sir.
I did spend some time with Mark in the cafeteria this morning. At an appropriate time, I can explain the logic of what they wanted to do.
Okay, thanks. And if anyone has anything in the bill that they are particularly interested in working on, Representative Wozniak is taking the lead on edits to that.
I'm meeting with the reporter.
Yeah. Thank you. Okay.
Forward the email from Rural Vermont to
Thank you.
sources, so sources you could post it. Is that all right?
Okay, with that, Kirby, do you want to join us?
Good morning.
Morning.
Kirby Keaton, Legislative Council. You'll be seeing me quite a bit today. In progressing forms of fatigue. The most energetic you'll get me. We have new language here relating to the regional assessment districts. We have a draft 3.1. As the chair mentioned before, this involves some modifications here and there based off of testimony, based off of committee feedback, and based mostly off of the Department of Taxes feedback and what they've said that they need to try to make this successful. So there's some, I don't want to say drastic changes, but there's some significant differences between this and the last version that we'll talk about, and I'll try to do my best as to why. Let you know as to why. So with that, first change is on line 4. This previously said something to the effect of statewide and regional assessment districts. Tax took a chance to say, let's leave the state out of it. As far as the name of the subchapter, which doesn't have a lot of legal significance anyway. And then the next change is on line 13. It starts with the first substantive statutory section relating to regional assessment districts. Previously, there were subsections here relating to the establishment and also a statutory set of standards for the department to use in deciding RAD boundaries. This version of things takes a different route. It is doing it in a more of the type of approach that you often see with other things, where it's a kind of a report back thing, where and we'll get to the report back at the bottom of this, but this statutory language goes with some session laws at the bottom of the bill now, where the department will look at RAD boundaries after school districts have been decided, and then come back and say what they think they should be. And then the General Assembly will have the opportunity to codify, as in put into statute, those boundaries, which will mean you're not going to look at any provisions relating to modifying the boundaries in the future, because under this approach, the statute would get modified to modify those boundaries in the future.
Can you describe some of the delegation of authority concerns?
Yeah, so I did have some concerns with our previous versions where, so there's, in the Vermont Constitution, which is based off of the US Constitution, there's a non-delegation doctrine, as in the Constitution gives each of the branches of government certain powers. And the Constitution does not allow the sharing of those, which is, fundamental to our whole system. The legislature makes laws. The executive manages and administers laws, and there's not to be mixing. Since we were in a position where there was the last version you looked at, it was set up so that a lot of power was being delegated to the Department of Taxes from the legislature to decide what the RAD boundaries are. And I did have concerns that I thought we had, we were setting up standards, we were setting up some safeguards to make sure that we're following the Constitution. But I still thought there was a pathway there for a court, if someone were to challenge it, say like an ancient municipality, that there was at least some vulnerability there where I couldn't 100% say that if the court wanted to look at it a certain way, they could say, you know what, too much power was given to tax. There was a delegation of legislative power that's not allowed. So out of those conversations that I did have with tax, and I had with colleagues of mine, such as the attorneys on Ledge Council who work on municipal law and run into non-delegation issues with that. In-house, we're brainstorming a lot of different ways that we could go about it. I'll say that this approach, which is coming from tax as an approach, makes sure that we are well clear of that issue, because they're reporting back and you will be putting in the law what the RAD boundaries are. So absolutely no room for anyone to argue that there was an unallowable delegation of legislative power. So that's what it does. With that, we can get into this language. So subsection A now says member municipalities and regional assessment districts shall fully reappraise their grand lists every 6 years. This is similar to what was there before. Member municipalities may contract jointly with one or more third parties to conduct the reappraisal. So we are back to May for this part, but it's not the end of the story. But initially, there's not required joint reappraisals under this language. So in subsection B, it says for the first full reappraisal conducted simultaneously by member municipalities as part of a regional assessment district, each municipality may, at its discretion, conduct a reappraisal jointly. Again, we're at May. For all subsequent simultaneous full reappraisals by member municipalities as part of a regional assessment district, as determined pursuant to this subchapter, a municipality shall conduct reappraisal jointly with one or more member municipalities. And this goes to the testimony from the department. I think they were using the phrase walk, don't run. They're just wanting to incrementally ease into this system. So for the first set of RAD mass reappraisals, there's a voluntary type element to participation. But after that first one, 6 years later, it would start to be joint. And so that allows like a lot of time for setting things up properly, which I think you've heard tax has been very concerned about whether they can successfully set it up if it's mandatory right from the beginning. So we have those changes. And again, there's a bunch of missing stuff here that related to setting up RAD boundaries and things like that, because that's handled in a different way now. Moving on page 2, we have the standard guidelines and procedures that PBR is to use for this, and that has not changed. But subsection B is different. The director of PBR will establish a schedule for each regional assessment district to fully reappraise every 6 years. That's the same. The director, at the director's discretion, may alter the reappraisal schedule for a RAD or one or more of a regional assessment district's member municipalities. If a municipality or a regional assessment district fails to reappraise on the schedule established by the director under this subsection, the state may withhold the education, transportation, and other funds from the municipality until the director certifies that the municipality or regional assessment district has complied with this subsection. So that is giving the department a stick to use in administering this.
And that feels vaguely familiar to me from a past penalty system related to property tax collection. Does that look familiar to you?
Yeah,
I can't remember where.
I'm not thinking.
First seeing it before.
I'm not thinking in current law we're like a great analogy for it, but that might have to do with me having given up that part of my portfolio to John Gray, who now is living in that world where, like, you know, if it's an education finance related thing, maybe I'm just not thinking of it. But no, it's, you know, it's not unheard of.
Is it familiar to you?
I know the secretary can withhold funding if districts aren't doing what they're supposed to do.
But this is like, I remember tax being, it's like a tax thing with municipalities. I remember seeing it as something related to tax collection too. So.
I think tax department has pitched this before.
And it says the state may withhold, not shall.
Very.
Right. That's a very important distinction. It should be used rarely.
Is that in our current future state, or in our future state, not current state? So you're talking about withhold the state, meaning the tax department may withhold the education opportunity payment?
I think it would be good to get taxes
Yeah.
testimony on what they're envisioning.
Yeah.
Clearly it has to be some kind of funds that, well, I don't, they could have used the state on purpose. So that does not limit it to just things coming from the Department of Taxes. So it is quite broad.
Wait, no, sorry, Representative Wozniak was first.
If it's about, you go.
It's about, you sure?
Yeah.
Is this I don't know, is this an area where parsimony might be judicious, where we just say may withhold funds? Because here we're specifying the funds. I mean, I know that this happened twice when I was secretary, but we made a decision not to touch education fund, we just withheld federal funds. Because that was enough pressure. It didn't disrupt the system, but it was enough pressure to get people to take seriously.
Actually, let's talk with tax, but where you're going makes sense to me.
Parsimony, don't
Yes.
leave
Mhm.
some.
Yes. It also just, yeah.
I think this language would allow for that kind of discretion, but it could also allow the state to withhold all of the money, the state money to the
And I
municipality,
think that's,
or they could choose to.
I mean, one would hope they were judicious, like you don't want to do harm, but you do need to have some discretion to put pressure sometimes, unfortunately.
Especially if the RADs don't line up with the school districts, it gets really funky.
Right.
let's tentatively make that edit and we'll check with tax about it.
I'm not sure if I heard.
So just have it be may withhold funds,
Oh, it already does that.
Well,
but just remove the education and transportation.
Okay, gotcha.
May withhold funds.
Funds, period. Don't know if legally that's much different.
I know.
Yeah.
it's just gonna raise a lot of.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah.
Sure.
Oh, sorry. You gave up your button and he lost it.
Thank you. On the, director may alter reappraisal schedule for the, yeah, we're going simply. So like you have 10 towns in the RAD. Town A says they want to do it in year 3. The director can say, no, you have to do it in year 2. That means.
I think this language is more specifically going to a situation where, especially at the beginning of the system, let's say there's a RAD where most of the towns are due.
Mhm.
But one of them just did it.
Mhm.
To give that flexibility to say, that one doesn't have, like, that one will say that the one you did last year
It's fine.
we'll say that's fine, we'll waive that. The other ones will, but you'll still be on this 6-year schedule with the others that's in your RAD. Stuff like that,
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
That was my question, Representative, as well. Only I'm gonna elaborate a little bit more. You gave the example of 1 year. I'm gonna give you the example of maybe even 4 years or 3 years. You know, if a town has done it 3 years prior to that date that's set,
Mhm.
PBR gonna say good to go, or they're gonna say, boom.
That's probably why Jill looked a little bit stressed out last time she was here. You have to make this hard decisions, right? And people aren't gonna necessarily be happy, but that's the position PBR will be in, to have to make those judgment calls.
All right, thanks. That's.
Okay, and then finally, there's a subsection C that's new. The director shall determine when the first simultaneous full reappraisal has been completed, and this is necessary because some of the things we were talking about before are triggered from the simultaneous. That's, after the first simultaneous reappraisal is when participation in the RAD starts to become mandatory. So there needs to be a referee saying when that happened. The appeal sections, thankfully, were not changed for the most part, which is, for me, I know that's what really matters for me, the biggest pain. We did add,
John Gray are like kind of becoming the same person a little.
what's that?
And John Gray are like kind of becoming the same person a little bit. It's fun.
Early in the session.
I'm just
Sorry.
kidding. I'm just kidding, obviously.
I know.
Yeah. I don't know if John
I made the
is.
same joke yesterday.
I did?
No, John did.
John-
Oh, okay. Oh, yeah.
It's easier for him.
Mine is definitely a joke. I don't know about John. So we did, there's just like a few little technical tweaks that were made in the appeals. This has to do with about the evaluations that are done by PBR and clarifying that they would not go to the RAD appeal boards. And I had overlooked one area, which I think is with petroleum and gas facilities, which is section 3621 that PBR values. So that was left out. So we just added that as one of the areas where PBR does the valuation.
I'm just gonna take a brief moment to say that Abby from Taxt is watching and texted me to say that it's current law, that penalty section is current law,
Oh,
and it's just got repealed and it's sort of added back in.
Oh, okay.
The withholding funds.
The withholding funds, like that,
Right.
it was familiar because it is in current law, but just not the area you should work in, yeah. They just moved it. She can also come in and say it to everyone if people would prefer that.
And is she comfortable? She likes the way it's written?
She wrote it.
Well, we can have her.
Okay.
Yeah.
By text.
Yeah, I'm good. That's the end of my back and forth via text, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, she wrote it. That's why.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay, so this is more on the technical side, but there's repeal of all of this current law sections relating to PDR ordering reappraisals and such, because under the new RAD system, this will all be worked out differently, right? So this won't be necessary. Most of these changes, by the way, are coming on, and we'll get to the effective dates at the end, but most of this stuff is coming online together, obviously, in years into the future. So this current law will stay as it is until there's the changeover to the RAD system. We've added a little clarifying provision for the equalization study section. Previously, it has said all municipalities within a regional assessment district shall be treated as a single entity for purposes of the equalization process under this section, which would mean that, they would have the same CLA. Tax that has asked to add the clarifying language, provided at least one simultaneous full reappraisal has been completed by the member municipalities.
Now, when we're saying simultaneous, do we truly mean simultaneous or within that?
We don't truly mean simultaneous. So as we were looking at before, it's PBR will make the call when it's considered simultaneous, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every single, because maybe PBR gave an exception to one of the municipalities in that year, for instance. They might still call that a simultaneous reappraisal. Okay. There's just a provision here. The approach that this language is taking, just so you know, is to, we've already been over this before, but I'll go over it again because we're looking at it, is to repeal the statutory sections from Act 73 relating to regional assessment districts and the transition provisions, because this language is replacing all of that. And drafting wise, there's a couple of different ways to go about this. One is to try to amend Act 73. The other is to just repeal it and start fresh. I'm partial to the start fresh because when you start, if this amended Act 73 and then this got amended later, and then, and then you get to amending this act that amended this act that amended this act that amended Act 73. And let's, so in my mind, at least the way my brain works, it's cleaner to do it this way. Another repeal that's been added to that though is Chapter 131, which is the Board of Civil Authority Appeals chapter in statute. All of the sections relating to RAD appeals will be replacing the Board of Civil Authority Appeals. So we have that. There's one section that is being moved out of there, which has to do with PDR evaluations, but the rest of that chapter would be repealed. We still have an $850 per parcel fee here for grand list maintenance.
I think I've heard from tax that they would like to actually just leave that. They think that's an appropriate number. But I don't know. I don't remember if they said sitting in the chair or not.
Highlight.
Might be about the right cost.
Okay, so let's unhighlight.
Okay.
Didn't we hear concerns though from municipal that it wasn't enough?
No, that this is for maintenance, not for
Right now, this is maintenance and reappraisal. We're saying this is.
Just for maintenance.
This is now just gonna be maintenance and that's the right.
And the language that we have for compensation for reappraisals has not changed from last version. So as a reminder, it's the commissioner shall estimate the cost of the municipality's full reappraisal and transfer the municipality the lesser of 2/3 of the estimated cost or $66 per grand list parcel. And that's going to be over 6 years. So if you were thinking of it in an annual way, it would be 11 a year.
I'm sure I think I mentioned this before, but if we stay with the $850 per parcel, we know what that amount is currently. But we don't really, we could probably figure out the $66. But I think it's important for me to understand what that new full boat cost is going to be.
Okay. We will ask JFO to do that. And I also think maybe the league said, and I thought it was a really good point, that we need some sort of small town minimum.
I thought that was on the 850 per parcel for maintenance of ground last.
Was it?
I think so,
Okay,
because it's a certain amount of cost, I think it was like $10,000 estimated cost to maintain the ground list, and some wouldn't get up to $10,000.
can someone work with Kirby to
I'll
have
work
that
with Kirby.
sentence?
and,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you. And sorry, Representative Pigley, are you saying that you just want like a fiscal estimate for the bill? Or you want a fiscal estimate for what towns need? I mean, ideally, those things would match, but,
Fiscal estimate for the bill,
okay,
but there's other things that are gonna play into that as well.
Yeah.
Because some of the stuff that we're doing could possibly increase the cost of reappraisals as well.
Mhm.
I mean,
And
if we're gonna require all assessors to be licensed,
Mm.
sure they're not gonna keep their current fees and.
Mm.
And then there may be other things in there as well that I
Okay.
haven't picked out, but it'd be a good starting point.
Okay.
And where the money's coming from. I mean,
indeed.
So the next change we have on page 16 here is the tax department positions. Previously, the department had asked for a hearing officer and a docket clerk positions. And those positions were going to be closer to when the RAD appeals boards were being set up. The change here is the tax is not asking for a docket clerk right now. They are asking for a hearing officer in the way that the language is phrased for HR purposes is one exempt position for the purpose of hearing property valuation appeals. And it's fiscal year 2027, so a little sooner than what the language had before.
The docket clerk is for 29. Is that what it was previously?
My understanding is they'll come, like, as they start to have that need, they'll come back.
This moved up the date, so is this in this year's budget?
No, it's not. That's something we would need to figure out with the appropriations committee,
And did they say why exempt and not classified?
but we can ask them.
I can get an educated guess. I mean, hearing officers tend to be exempt.
And they're in a different division. I don't know if you've ever looked at the tax department org chart, but I just happened to do it recently for some other reason.
For another reason too.
Okay. Right, and so like the hearing officers are sort of like on their little own branch of independence. Yeah,
Like answerable directly to the commissioner kind of position. So
that's a much more articulate way of saying what I just said.
That's why I asked.
Yeah.
Usually the independent positions for the classified.
so do we have in here, Kirby, regardless of whether it's a hearing officer or a docket clerk, where the appeals go first? I mean, do they go to the hearing officer? Do they go to the PBR? Do they go somewhere else?
this hearing officer will be the appeals to PBR. It would not be like the director trying to run an administrative appeal, hearing. It would be this person's job is to do that, and they would presumably hire someone who has the experience in property valuation and in the law around it to do it in a professional way.
So again, those appeals would come into that individual first. That's where they would submit your appeals to the hearing officer.
From the RAD board, from the RAD appeals board. That's the appeals, like if the normal flow happens, it would be grievance, then the RAD appeal board, just like the BCA now. And then appeals from there would go, if they're made to the commissioner, which is the language used here, it's not actually to the PBR director, it's to the commissioner. The appeals to the commissioner would be heard by this position, the hearing officer position, not the actual commission.
Okay, I guess it's just as long as folks know or will know who to send it to, is it through an address or email or something from the RAD appeals board. Right? I mean, they're gonna be set up in a form that people are gonna know this is where the appeals go.
And there is language in here to try to predict when people may be confused by that. And so we have language where If a person appeals to the wrong entity, that entity will forward it to the correct entity and it will count as being timely filed.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not sure if we've covered every instance where someone might make a mistake like that, but there's some instances where if that happens.
Thanks.
And this might be answered later in the bill, but we have a report back where we will determine the RAD boundaries after
Mhm.
potential school district boundaries are decided, but not yet operational. Yes, so basically I'm trying to figure out why this has to start in FY 27 in the grant.
The actual position or the whole thing?
Specific.
This position's earlier than the rest of the timeline, and I
Tax department can answer that
I
question.
think that's, yeah, sure.
I think they need the. In talk. I think an interesting thing that we'd never spent any time talking about last year, because there was a lot going on last year, and I think is worthy of just sort of naming, is that in Act 73 and last year's budget, we significantly increased both funding for contractors and staff at the Agency of Education. And we did not do that for the Department of Taxes at all in any way. And they had half the policy in that enormous piece of legislation and have like really big new initiatives going. And they had a really solid staff team that's been doing incredible work, but I just think it's like an interesting thing to keep in mind, given how much new stuff we had them take on and how much incredible work they've done up until this point to get that going.
And I don't at all disagree with.
No, I've been thinking about it a lot this week and I just
Yeah.
thought I would take a minute to say
Yeah,
it.
no, and this is my reaction to this is that there are many other parts of state government who desperately need staff because I'm mad about fun stuff. Anyway.
Okay.
On that, I think two other questions that keep coming up for me. We actually took a very different strategy with the agency. We didn't actually, we gave them temporary staff and we gave them a ton of money for consultants. That is not the same as building the capability to manage ongoing operations. And could we also, is it possible to understand, I mean, I'm concerned about what we also heard about staffing shortages. And can we actually get a list of how many, and we know how many positions they're carrying. We don't know how many bodies are in place. Can we even just get from the administration how many bodies are at AOE and how many are at tax?
We have a tax, but I think we can get that.
I looked to Charlie because he's who did the.
It'd be helpful to know, because positions are not the same as employees.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, so, yeah, because they have 167 positions, I think. And they had a 12% vacancy in their claims adjusters, but then 5% across the rest of the staff, so we can look at this.
It's important to know who's there because we are putting through very significant and consequential policy if it fails because there aren't people in place. That's a big problem. And I think the problem is even worse at AOE. So I think we should know what those bodies are.
Yeah, I can do that with tax, I can't add up. We can also always ask AOE about that.
Maybe I'll ask, and I can ask education, maybe they've had. Yeah, I'll ask them.
Okay, so there's the position changes. The next thing we have here are the conforming changes for the repeal of Board of Civil Authority appeals. Reminder, Board of Civil Authorities will continue to exist and they have other responsibilities beyond this. So don't want anyone to think that we are getting rid of Boards of Civil Authority. The next section we did have some changes from tax. We had, this is the transition language that was from Act 73. We've repealed the Act 73 transition language just to replicate it here. Early on, there was feedback from tax that some of the things under subsection A were going to be difficult. So in the language you looked at previously, I had actually taken this stuff out and only had the second part of the transition language. For this version, tax has said, let's have it exactly the same as Act 73, but change the dates. So that's what you're looking at here. This is the Act 73 language for a transition over to RADs, except things are pushed out a year. So 2027 became, or I think this is pushed out 2 years, actually. This is pushed out 2 years. So I'll go through what it says now. The director of PBR shall not order any new municipal reappraisals of grand list properties that is not part of a regionalized reappraisal system on or after January 1, 2028. That was in Act 73 because the idea was to slow down the ordering of new mass reappraisals under current law so that the municipalities were prepared to transition over the new system, right? But again, a lot of these changes in the language you're looking at now are taking a slower approach to things. So instead of stopping what's in subdivision 1 here in 2026, it's moving that out to subdivision 2 is a reappraisal order for which a municipality does not have a contract in place before January 1, 2031. Shall no longer have enforcement effect of law on or after January 1, 2031. Originally, that said 2029. And third, a municipality shall not enter into a new reappraisal contract on or after January 1, 2028, except for those that are part of a regionalized reappraisal system. So again, this language is being added back. It's from Act 73 for the transitions, but it is extended out 2 years. And then we did have this language before, but we've also extended out the dates 2 years. So on or before January 15, from January 15, 2028 to January 15, 2031, the Commissioner of Taxes shall submit a report to Ways and Means and Senate Finance relating to the progress made in preparing for the implementation of RADs pursuant to this act.
Madam Chair, so that last number 3, municipality shall not enter into a new reappraisal contract on or after January 1st, 2028. Do we know how many towns might be in that boat right now? Because again, the boat of having a contract starting in 2028.
No, but I bet Jill does. We can ask her.
However,
However, Charlie has something in his bag that he's gonna share with you.
I'm assuming there could be. I mean, when we did our reappraisal, we.
Yeah, no, it's usually, the contracts are pretty far out.
that was what I was going to say. We do have from PBR when the reappraisal contracts are supposed to start. So that's in their report. So when this is about when you can enter into a new contract, not when it's scheduled to happen.
Is that? Oh.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Does
that make sense?
True. So
So I could sign a contract that starts in 2030 tomorrow,
Yes.
and it would not be, and that contract could still go through under this.
yes.
Okay.
So it is, I mean, I think the point I would like to get across is this is setting to push things out quite a bit. And I'm not saying there'll be any kind of like pop judgment or anything, but it's just so that you are aware. The current system will continue to kind of do its thing, and the language here is not disrupting that really. I think the difficult part will become when you switched over to RADs and you still have so many municipalities who are still have contracts in place from the old system and things like that. So I think that is going to be the interesting transition period. Tax has been concerned to make sure that this is written in a way where we're not disrupting a whole lot of stuff right now, including going ahead and scheduling this year a reappraisal a few years from now.
Okay, thanks.
I just want to point out the same sort of phasing of contract transitions is going to be necessary in any merging process. It will be necessary in any school district merger process that we are spending a tremendous amount of time phasing and carefully transitioning on tax and assuming that mergers can happen in a year in Act 73. And there's just a heck of a lot of this stuff that no one's talking to.
I think the education committee certainly has it in mind, and it's trying to figure out the shape. Yes, understood. Anyone else have anything on, what are you doing?
I was trying to figure out the years that they're scheduling out
Okay.
for, but I couldn't find it in the PBR report. But I know they're out to 2033, I think is when they're scheduling for now.
Thanks.
That rings a bell with me. It's pretty far out. Okay. So the next thing we have is something new. This is language from the tax department on regional assessment district boundaries. This is the session law that is meant to involve a report back to the General Assembly to put the RAD boundaries in the statute. It says the Commissioner of Taxes shall identify and submit proposed geographic boundaries for regional assessment districts that are aligned with school district boundaries and have a minimum of 10,000 parcels to the House Committee on Gov Ops and Ways and Means and to Senate Finance and Government Operations. B, notwithstanding subsection A of this section, the commissioner may, at the commissioner's discretion, identify a regional assessment district boundary that includes more than one school district or identify more than one regional assessment district boundary within one school district. So they could go either way, which we've had versions of language like that before that we've looked at too. And sub C, it is the intent of the General Assembly to enact regional assessment district boundaries based on the commissioner's geographic boundaries proposed under this section. That's, I guess, tax's way of saying, please listen to our recommendations. But as your alleged council person, I could say that there's no legal binding.
Notwithstanding.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think it was, in talking, like, I'll own that in talking to the department about this, I was like, oh my goodness, I really don't want you to like hand us a thing that we then need to relitigate internally, because there's just enough of that right now. And I think this was their sort of gestural nod towards. Don't worry, you can just check a box, you don't have to relitigate.
Yeah.
Obviously, we will relitigate, yes, of course we will.
I have full faith in us.
I have full faith in a future legislature to relitigate this issue, yes.
So that's how this language is tackling boundaries.
Cool.
I think so.
Your mic is on.
There we go. Thanks, Jake. Even does technical
I
support.
press the button. Thanks, Jim. Thanks, Portia. I think So, okay, effective dates. What we have now is that the transition provisions, the repeal of the Act 73 sections that are being replaced, those are on passage. The regional assessment district boundaries report that we were just looking at will take effect. Shall take effect, and the boundary submission to the General Assembly shall be due on the 15th day of January, immediately following the enactment of new school district boundaries by the General Assembly. This is tax saying, we're not going to do this unless you do what you need to do first. Under this language, if you were to, in this session, establish school district boundaries, then next January, tax would report back on RAD boundaries. If that does not happen this session and it's next session, the school district boundaries are established, then it would be the January after that, the tax would report back. And then, you know, some of these contingencies start kicking in if you take longer than 2 years.
Can you change it to the 15th day of the December? So it's, can you move it a month prior? Thank you.
Can I go back to the previous, I'm a little still processing the previous section with the intent language. I'm trying to figure out how this parallels other sectors, because here we are doing with tax in the legislature, what in education is done by the state board. And I'm thinking not about Act 73, because presumably we're writing law not just for Act 73, but for a long time, so that you don't have to keep changing what you do with tax. I'm just thinking, what's the best long-term way to support transition around RAD boundaries?
Oh, so if the RAD boundary needs to change in the future?
Yeah, I mean, in 10, 20 years, when.
Yeah. And so I think that gets to the delegation of authority concern that Kirby and Jim Devlin had.
The way that this is set up, the answer is that the General Assembly would do that in statute.
But the discretion, I mean, does it only come to us if it's coming from the commissioner? What if?
I mean, if it's in statute, you can change statute whenever you want.
So a RAD could come to us, or a random constituent can come to us, or someone from,
Yeah. It would be,
Belgium could come to
it
us.
would, so I think, the trade-off there is legislature has full power over that, is not reliant on the department taking action or anything. But the system becomes slower because it starts to become legislative process required in order to make any adjustments. So,
I think that's why I was asking, A, it's slower, B, it's not systematic, right? It's dependent on someone being upset and coming to us, and people have different capacities to do that.
it could be based on administrative concerns that the department brings. It says they bring, administrative suggestions every year.
We do, we are setting up an advisory board, frankly, on ed finance issues. That sort of is like a board, will have some authority. So that's sort of an interesting thing to think. Absolutely, absolutely, yeah. So if you want to think about this, and come back with. Okay,
You would have an opportunity later, of course, to also change the statute to make it more flexible, I should say.
Just, we could, simple, could throw in something that says like every 10 years. The General Assembly shall review RAD boundaries. So,
could, I'm not, I guess I don't personally feel concerned about the idea that there's gonna be something wrong with the RAD boundaries and no one's gonna tell us about it.
I think that's where it comes in, it's not an issue. I'm just wondering about parallel processes.
Yeah.
Different standards or approaches in there.
Yeah.
I have two questions, not necessarily on this section, but I guess one is if school boundaries don't get readjusted, school district boundaries, this is all contingent upon that.
Yes.
Does it make sense to move forward with regional assessment districts in the absence of new school boundaries? Does this allow for?
Yes to the first, no to the other. The contingencies from Act 73 have been included here. So you have this contingency about tax will not report back about boundaries, but it's not the only.
Still makes good policy to move ahead with regional assessment districts in the absence of school.
That's my point. This should be good policy that can stand on its own. It can't stand on its own.
Here we go. Here's the remainder of this act shall take effect on, so this is the bulk of it. This is the RAD stuff. The remainder of this act shall take effect on January 1, 2031, and that's pushed back, by the way. Note that. Provided regional assessment district appeals boards shall commence jurisdiction, and further provided the General Assembly enacts new school district boundaries on or before July 1, 2027. So if you don't meet that July 1, 2027 goal, this is written to become ineffective entirely.
So the second question I have is on page 6. We had some testimony on board members shall not be panelists for a hearing on the town in which they come from. So that was raised as a concern about the composition of an appeals group if we have multiple people or multiple parcels. Anyway, I'll just flag that for something we should discuss probably is whether or not it's good policy.
You have a
Well, I think we had talked about no two members coming from the same municipality. So that it's 4B, I think, or something like that. Page 6.
Or B is different.
There, yeah. Board members shall not be a panelist for hearing involving property located in the municipality for which member is represented.
That's different from what you said previously.
I know, that's the,
And
I think that's the point.
That's my point. It's a question about, that means if from the RAD board of, say, 30 members, actually more, then it's, then you're restricting then people you can pick from that and throw to serve as appeals. And if in a year in which there's a lot of appeals because of a new appraisal, then you're maybe crippling that board in terms of the number of people that are here. So I thought that one other construct we could say is that a board member, the appeals board shall have no more than 2 members from the same municipality on that appeals board. I don't know if that's more workable, but I think that was flagged for us as
I think it was a really good point that she made.
yeah,
Yeah.
as a concern.
Does it work for folks if Charlie works with
Yes.
Kirby to, okay, tighten that sentence. Okay, change that sentence. Great. Okay, thank you. Cool. I'm gonna close up shop on this. Yes?
I just
Yes.
have to say, I'm concerned. I think it's
About the contingency.
Yeah, I think that's, I mean, if this is good policy, we should be going good policy.
We can talk about that a lot more. I think that every aspect connected to Act 73, there are multiple people who think that about each section. And we're gonna need to grapple with that. Thank you, Kirby. Oh, you're staying there. Let's, I don't know, like wiggle ourselves or something to, yeah, okay. Moving to non-homestead residential tax classification. And we might be bumping 588 because of some fiscal note stuff, so. In case anyone's. No, I don't know yet.
Classifications? Yeah, it should say classifications on draft 3.1.
Nope, we're good. Keep it. Keep it. Kirby, can you share the language with us? Please so much, sir.
Yes, so this is the tax classifications language. There are fewer changes. This is also a new draft 3.1. I think the resolution is also a 3.1. There are fewer changes here. Also highlighted, they should be. As a reminder of what we're looking at, the content of all of this goes to creating a new property tax classification in the future based off of non-homestead residential properties, potentially taxing them at a higher rate. Also, those changes involve contingencies from Act 73 that are contingent on the other policy changes taking place that were in Act 73. So with that, get to changes. There was, so when you heard testimony, it was at a time in which I was working on draft and tax was reviewing drafts and things were changing a lot. So you last heard testimony from Abby wanting a particular approach to the employer issue when it comes to long-term rentals under the classification. Should have let me do that the whole time.
No need for next time.
He accepts cookies.
I thought this was just your like wind up.
See your laptop.
To him, he's like, yeah, you called it what I thought I was referring to things. Yeah, no, this whole time I was walking through language. So anyway, You can join me now on page 4. That's how far I made it. So yeah, Abby had some language, I had some language, we were going back and forth. And at the time of testimony, it sounded like the committee was happy with what Abby had brought, so that's what you're looking at now. So it says, a long-term rental, we can back up if you want the refresher. Under the classification system, if it's a long-term rental, that would mean that the property, or that portion of the property at least, that's used as a long-term rental would be classified as non-homestead, non-residential, which would be presumably a lower rate than if it were non-homestead residential. So we have definitions for what a long-term rental means: a dwelling for which rent is paid for the rights of occupancy for periods of at least 30 days, with combined rental periods in the current calendar year that total at least 6 calendar months, which need not be consecutive. And there is a bona fide landlord-tenant relationship between the parties. We have this clarifying subdivision big B here that says long-term rental also means, previously we had broken out employer or employee housing and farm worker housing. This iteration of it just combines the two. And it says also means a dwelling used by an employer. This is the new part that Abby had pointed out, that previously we weren't specifying used by the employer to house the employer's employees. It was based more off of a long-term dwelling means dwelling for employees. So anyways, that clarification is added for at least 6 calendar months, which need not be consecutive in the current calendar year. As used in this section, employee means an individual who is reported by an employer for purposes of unemployment insurance. So that's pretty much the same as what we said before, other than the clarifying part about specifying that the dwelling is used by the employer.
And can you back up
Yeah.
more to just like that definition of long-term rental, we heard testimony about sort of desires to change that. And just want to name that I had a conversation with tax about that. And there's just like, while we're sort of sitting on that section, and the whole idea of sort of knowing in advance how you're going to use a property versus knowing after the fact how you're going to use a property. And we talked about how, and so like when we're done with Kirby and we talk to Jake, I just want to like sort of name that there are some ideas on how to address that. Back to you.
Sure.
I just wanted to say it while we were on that section.
Mhm.
And that's, you're also talking about reducing the 6 months to 3 months too, isn't that?
Maybe, so let's get into that.
So anyway, there's not a huge substantive change here, but I will point out to what degree there is any kind of substantive change among the various definitions you've looked at. So this defines employee basically based off of having a UI requirement, which is what you had looked at before. And then for farm employee, it uses this definition for farm employee, and then without regard for whether the employee has a UI requirement, because as we've discussed before, farm employees usually do not have a UI requirement. So we use this other reference. Previously, we had used the current use definition of farmer to identify the farm employee's employer. This definition does a similar thing. The actual substantive difference, and I can pull up this 9 VSA 4469A if you want. By referencing the current use definition for farmer, there's, I think, 3 different ways that a person can qualify as a farmer under that. This definition is based off of 50% farm income, which is one of the ways under current use a person can be considered a farmer. So as far as any substantive difference between the definitions, I think that is really it. Is how do you want to identify the employer of the farm employees? I think in committee discussion, we had talked about the 50% farm income thing. I used that as an example when going over it the first time. And and that's what this does, is like that example that we went over. So I don't know if the committee wants to discuss that or not, but that's just as far as telling you the difference between this and what you looked at before. I think legally, substantively, that's the difference. It's just how you identify the farmer who's the employer. And again, this version is based off of having 50% of your income being farm income.
Which is a little stricter than the current use of both.
Yes.
Under the current use definition, there's some other ways to be considered a farmer. And we can pull those up if you, I just don't know if you want to spend time on it.
Does anyone need to see that?
Sure.
Okay.
I appreciate that definition you're using, Kirby, is straightforward. And it is or it isn't, which makes it easier out there in the world. We have wishy-washy sort of things.
Nothing's straightforward.
Well, to the best of our
Well,
ability.
and I appreciate not redefining things when there's definitions other places. That's my favorite
Right,
thing.
there you go.
Yes.
That's what I was trying to say.
There's a definition for it, just happens to be in a different spot.
Yes,
Yes.
yeah, exactly.
Almost there.
You're welcome to sit over there if you want. Oh, that's actually nice.
I'm gonna remember that. So it's subsection A1, farm employee, means an individual employed by a farm employer for farming operations. So we have to look at the other definitions to see what those things mean. Farm employer means a person earning at least 1/2 of his or her, that should be updated, but we don't say that anymore. Annual gross income from the business of farming, as that term is defined in under the US tax code. It's another way of saying farm income. So that's what you have using this definition. That's the language you have. This was the language that was suggested by the department that Abby went over during testimony last time you heard testimony on this. And it's completely workable, obviously. I'm not saying that any of these things are any better than the other.
I have a question. I mean, we point out what is a farmer and in relation to this legislation. But we don't seem to identify what an employer is, such as a corporate employer who hires foreign workers to,
I think Kirby can answer
Is
that.
are we gonna be covering that as well? Or should we?
I think part of why I think it's probably ideal to use the unemployment insurance requirement is that it answers so many things for us. So you don't have to define it. It's all part of that existing UI system to identify who's an employer, who's an employee, and also it's something that's tracked by the Vermont Department of Labor. So tax has the ability to easily check as well. Yeah, so most of those things are answered. There's still within UI certain jobs that don't have a UI requirement, which would be left out. I think if there's a caveat about that approach, there's that. So alternatively, you could use the current use definition of farmland. Subdivision big A there is essentially the same thing as what you just looked at, using the recommended definition from tax, but also that definition would leave out the farm crops way of qualifying. And so this is the additional ways to qualify here, which has to do with the production of farm crops and getting into the weeds on that stuff. If you do want to make it simple and leave it as farm income, then the language that you have works great. If you want to try to broaden it, this is a different way.
Does everyone, now that we understand it, does everyone feel like this is broad? No, great.
I'm
Okay.
struggling a little bit because I have it's almost like one of Charlie's exercises with the cards, because I have specific. So in our area, in Chittenden County, there are several different farms that definitely are farming, but also have a lot of other activities to kind of support the income of that piece of property. They may have employees. And my question is, so if they're not technically farm employees, would they
They live
then?
on the farm?
Yeah,
Okay, great. Okay, I just want to make sure.
Yeah.
There. Okay.
if they're not technically farm employees, because the farm might, make 48% of its income from actual
Wait, but
farming.
wouldn't they be employees?
Well, that's my question.
So
So
it's-
then would they
it's all-
have to,
It's just
Would it-
employee.
my question is,
Okay, sorry.
so would those employees, if the farm doesn't technically meet the definition of, 50% of its income being a farm, would those employees then have to fall under the unemployment insurance definition? Because maybe I'm misunderstanding. I thought you either had a sort of unemployment insurance bar or you were a farm employee. And if there are farm employees that kind of fall in this hazy middle, they're employed in farm work, but that farmer might not be considered a farmer under these definitions.
So my understanding is that basically all people who work for money are within the UI definition, except for farmers and folks who are incarcerated.
So you're saying that
Is that
those-
true?
A few others. I
Okay, who are the few?
can pull that law.
Let's do that offline.
Wouldn't that be seasonal, like tourism industry?
So let's,
I recall that the farm workers are on a list of 4. Obviously, like Department of Labor would be the testimony you're really looking for on UI.
okay. Representative Burkhardt, I feel fairly sure that your issue is covered, but I'm going to ask you to figure it out with Kirby later.
Okay.
Or actually even whoever does UI law.
So he does UI law.
Okay.
Um,
It's a delightful rabbit hole.
Sorry.
No, it's a useful one. I'm just saying, like, once you go into UI law, you don't ever come back out again.
Okay.
And we're gonna keep on going.
So I apologize if I caused that rabbit hole.
You did not. No, it's an important, I want to make sure that everything is covered.
Right, so now you're fully aware of what you're referencing with the definition you have there for long-term rental. Non-homestead, non-residential was changed because this language has removed the caveat that the department had requested to automatically put buildings that have 5 or more dwelling units automatically into non-homestead, non-residential. By removing that automatic inclusion, it would mean that buildings that have 5 or more units, including short-term rentals, those short-term rentals would previously, in the previous language you had, those short-term rentals in a larger building would be not treated as the second home, the non-homestead residential rate, they would have been treated as apartments. They would have been treated as non-homestead, non-residential. So this is remove that language to change that treatment so that all short-term rentals across this language would get that same treatment as non-homestead residential. The department, of course, has testified that it makes some of the administration of it more difficult to do this.
Does anyone want to hear from Jake on that again?
So.
Yes, that's fine.
I'm the only one putting up my hand, but
You're allowed. Okay, and Mark did too. Everyone wants to hear what Jake has to say.
Sure, Jake Feldman, Tax Department, you recommend, at least at first, to include the bigger apartment buildings in non-homestead, non-residential. The reason is that while there may be some very small number of apartments in those bigger buildings that are short-term rental, it constitutes a tiny part of the tax base, but a massive amount of work for both local officials and landlords. So that is why, at least at first, we would recommend keeping that in non-homestead, non-residential, bigger apartment buildings.
because of the amount of work.
Work and for a tiny part of the tax base.
If I may ask Jake a question, I think you identified the number of short-term rentals in larger apartment buildings in previous testimony.
We know that there's 2,000 apartments in Vermont that are rented short-term. So we do not have data on how many of those are in smaller apartment buildings. Like where I used to live on Liberty Street has a short-term rental, small old farmhouse, versus these bigger buildings. We don't know, but we do know that Burlington doesn't allow that kind of thing. That's where a lot of the bigger buildings are, so I could try to get more granular on that data, but.
And just
Really small.
to put in context, 2,000 units, amongst how many residential units in the state?
There's 75,000 apartments.
Okay.
And how many residential units is something like 265,000. Total residential units.
And so for me, I feel like we're talking about a fairly small Venn diagram of apartments that might be taxed as apartments and not as short-term rentals in this context. And it's worth waiting a few years while all the rest of this sorts out to figure out if that needs to be addressed.
I appreciate your saying, wait a few years. I think what we know is people respond powerfully to incentives.
Yes.
And so it's the kind of thing you want to track, but I think the case that you don't want to make a lot of work for no big squeeze for little juice, I get that, right?
The other thing, Madam Chair, that I think it would address, I think, is a lot of times if they have somebody that has 5 apartments or more, they don't know for sure at the beginning of the year, whether or not they could maybe have to run in 13, run that building as well. They don't, so.
Onwards. We're not gonna pick up the OPR bill until 11-ish for anyone who's waiting for that one. It's the time of year where the agenda is gonna change every 5 minutes, so refresh your agendas. What else, Kirby?
What else?
What else?
There's just some clarifying language added to the appeals as they apply to classifications. The language that we already had was persons aggrieved by a decision to classify property for taxation purposes under this section may appeal in the manner provided for property valuation appeals under this title. So there's that. There's some clarifying language added. The commissioner shall provide written guidance for municipalities to follow when hearing such appeals and technical assistance if requested by a municipal official responsible for such appeals. This is to get at, I think the issue was that municipalities may need help And this is the help that we have at the state level to provide.
Great.
Could try to go farther, but I ran this by tax and they thought, feels weird to talk about Jake was in the room, but I'm pretty sure Jake was like, that seems fine.
Jake, fine? Fine, great. Jim, would you like us to all say hello to you? Hello, Jim. Nice to see you.
You look terrific.
It's nice to see all
Nice
of
to
you.
see you.
Look, Preston,
Just was curious as to how your committee member was doing this
You're
section.
super
He's doing really well, thank you.
It's not that we need to make, sense, but you know.
We're actually getting rid of supervisory fees, so.
I'm so happy you're here to check up on that.
we think he's a big deal.
I heard he made a big deal speech on the floor last week. Is that true?
It is, but we're gonna go back to testimony now.
Good to see you, Jim.
So the next thing we're gonna look at is the dwelling use attestation, which is a key part of the administration. There were some changes. Previously, what you looked at was some language for dwelling use attestation and also some additional language for the penalty for a fraudulent filing. What it was silent about, though, was whether there's a penalty for accidental errors. So we do have language that addresses that now. Subsection G is the existing language relating to homesteads, because homesteads are intermingled with this classification system, right? Because homestead is one of the classifications. So here's some changes to the existing law on erroneously filed homesteads or incorrect, not always, whatever. Subsection G. If the property identified in a declaration, this is a homestead declaration under subsection B of this section, is not the taxpayer's homestead, we're removing the part here about, or if the owner of a homestead failed to declare a homestead, because that's addressed later. I'll back up and say there's going to be a slightly different world when it comes to filings. Under current law, you could file a homestead for a property that's not really your homestead and maybe benefit, or maybe not benefit, right? Because we have, the key part is there's different rates for homesteads and non-homesteads in different municipalities. Because under current law, with how our system works, is it's really town to town as to whether it's a good, helpful or not as helpful for you to file a homestead. So under current law, there's a different penalty structure for failures to file because it could go either way. That's how things are. Under the new system, it will always be better to be a homestead. And it will always be the worst as far as what you have to owe in taxes to be a short-term rental or a second home. So things are going to be written differently because there's different incentives there that the law is trying to keep people within, right? So that's what these changes are about. So this is not changing current law for now. This is changing current law in the future when classifications are a thing, just to be clear. So we're changing the homestead penalties. It says if the property identified is not the taxpayer's homestead, the commissioner shall notify the municipality, and the municipality shall issue a corrected tax bill that may, this is current law, where the municipality may choose to impose a penalty, right? That's current law, where they're allowed to do that. Including, and so the municipality may, if the governor body, if the select board has approved this, include a penalty of up to, the change is going from 3% to 5%. The 3% penalty under current law is for basically when an accident was made and it was not in favor of the taxpayer. under current law, there's up to an 8% penalty when the mistake was made and it was in favor of the taxpayer, as in they were going to financially gain from that. Because we now have a system where it's always, it's going to be always clear, depending on your classification, whether it's beneficial or not. There's language changes here. So instead of 3, it's just if you make a mistake with the homestead, it's going to be 5. It will always benefit you to claim a homestead when it's not your homestead. So the penalty is just always 5. And it would always be to the benefit of a mistake like that to the taxpayer. There's language below here is where if the owner of a homestead fails to declare a homestead as required. So this would be the instance where it's not in the taxpayer, like the mistake that was made was not in their favor, and there is no penalty under this language. It's just, we're going to correct it and move on.
Support the intent here, just in the spirit of paperwork reduction. Does the flow have to go this way? I mean, aren't there more homestead than not homestead filers? So I'm looking at Jake. This creates the burden of every single parcel owner filing the homestead thing. What if we went the other way around? I don't know.
Maybe I'm misunderstanding. I was thinking that every. Go ahead, Jim.
Did you weigh that? I don't know if you weighed that.
The general tax department, you didn't contemplate like a default homestead kind of world. We're continuing with the current world where homesteads have to file each year. Which I think is what you're talking about.
Yes, I'm wondering, does it make sense to have the default category be the biggest category and then cascade from there?
Right, well, right, in this, the default category is like the worst tax category. And so there's an incentive to file.
And yeah.
And if you don't file, which I imagine like somebody who lives in New Jersey but owns a place in Stowe, they may not file it. Right, be not homestead residential.
I think there's also we've spent time taking testimony about folks who are taxpayers who are low income enough that they don't file income taxes and then might not know that they're eligible for property tax credits and income adjustments. And the filing of the homestead, I think, is a helpful trigger towards actually accessing that.
I just was trying to.
No, it's a great-
The relative merits of, there's cost both ways.
Absolutely. I think it's an interesting question.
So we're keeping the current law here where if there was fraudulent intent, it's a 100% penalty of education tax. The department has said that fraud is hard to prove, and usually it's the department having to look into that. So there is a substantive change here where in cases of fraud, when it comes to homesteads in the future, it would be the Department of Taxes looking into that and not the municipality, and imposing that 100% penalty.
What's the logic from moving it one way or another?
Moving it to tax.
There's, again, consolidation of.
It was, I mean, this was a recommendation from tax, but my understanding is because of the work needed to do that. And also I think tax has in their possession the homesteads.
Jake, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, sorry, you felt the tax department, basically like Burton said, fraud is rare and hard to prove, and it's kind of more something that the tax department would want to handle rather than kicking it to the town.
We've talked about sort of data matching between sort of, income tax records and things like that, and that a town wouldn't be able to do that.
Is there a date change at all, or is it the same date for the folks that didn't file a homestead to get it squared away?
As far as I know.
You haven't changed any dates.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so that's the homestead. Of course, there's the dwelling use attestation as well. The beginning of this is the same language we looked at last time, but there will be a new requirement for dwelling use attestation in cases where property is not a homestead. As far as penalties, though, those are the changes that we were looking at, it's just the inclusion of the penalties. So before we had one subdivision two, it's been broken out for not fraud and fraud. Fraud stays the same. It is the 100% penalty, same as the homestead, when it comes to a fraudulently filed dwelling use attestation. But we have slightly different language now for cases where dwelling use attestation has errors or omissions, but the commissioner does not find that there was fraud. In that case, the commissioner shall notify the municipalities, and the municipality shall issue a corrected tax bill similar to the homestead situation, with the same penalty as above for the homestead penalty in the cases of an error. So 5%. And those penalties would be handled by the municipality in that case. With dwelling use attestations, if there was an error or omission and the commissioner finds it's fraudulent, under this language, the commissioner is the one assessing the penalty and handling those cases. And so that's what we have for the penalties.
If someone, under current law, has a homestead, and they file their homestead, and then 2 months later, they get like the best job offer ever, and they move to Hawaii, and rent out their home, how do they withdraw their homestead?
Good news to tell us.
I just like, for a millisecond, I was just like, I was fully there in that, and it was great. Yeah, it's so good right now. What?
Do they have two jobs where you're going?
No,
Um,
the person is only, where I'm going only has one job. Maybe no jobs. Maybe it's just like, it's a free home in Hawaii.
there's a process with.
Where they have a very high second home tax rate, just for the record. Yeah.
How you're going to help them.
Yeah, they-
Yeah. The tax department.
More classifications.
Okay.
There's a process for withdrawing and amending and changing, and then Jake handles that a lot more than I do, so I would defer if.
Yeah, Chief Development Tax Department, if there's almost a withdrawal form. I don't know if that's in law or something that we concocted, but you can certainly you're required to withdraw your homestead if you find out that it's not gonna be your homestead.
And so, and we're not changing that. And so if someone, say, was declared non-homestead, non-residential, and then they wound up not being able to rent out for the sort of period that they thought they would, then they could change that then they could change that under current law and under this future law.
It would only be future law, right?
Yes.
And yeah, there would have to be a similar process worked out to what Jake just described. We haven't tackled that in statute directly. But I don't see it conflicting with what you're looking at now for the penalties, because this is about errors and omissions for the filing of the dwelling use attestation. If the real world ends up being differently than at the time the attestation was filed, I'm not sure that would be considered error and omission, especially if the person comes back later to correct it and say, actually, this is how it's gone.
And I'm being like less direct than is necessary. I was trying to work through this sort of like desire I had for the attestations to be looking backwards rather than looking forwards, because I feel like it's easier to know what happened in the past than it is to know what will happen in the future. And particularly in the case of something like a rental property where you don't know if you're going to be able to rent that out into like a few long-term chunks or medium-term chunks, or if you'll need to rent it out entirely short-term. And so it seems like I didn't realize how, like, that there was a whole system for withdrawals. And so I want us to just like spend a little bit of time thinking through this idea that someone could say prospectively, I think that I will be able to rent this out in this way, and then it turns out that you can't, and you.
I think one issue you're raising is it, in a practical sense, because of the way this is set up, assuming it doesn't change. The penalties that we're talking about, the department wouldn't be in a position to decide whether a penalty applies until it was after the fact.
Yeah.
Because you know, like halfway through the year, maybe property hasn't been used as a long-term rental, but there would still be time for it to continue to nonetheless qualify. Situations like that. So it's gonna be after the fact that you're looking, at least as far as enforcing this stuff.
Same with, just to make sure it's another option on the record, someone that is a second home and they come and make it their primary residence. So are they gonna get a reduction in their property tax bill? Be
A
interesting.
late filed homestead declaration, as long as it comes in before the deadline. Over. Yeah.
Could we clarify again for my benefit, maybe others as well, but the example that we gave of a bakery downstairs and an Airbnb upstairs, 25% of the area, floor area was Airbnb and 75% was non-homestead. We have to do the same thing for the land currently, correct? As far as
Splitting it
breaking
by
up.
square footage, yeah.
And I guess my question a while back was whether or not it would definitely be easier for assessors and listers to just have, in that particular case, all the land in as non-homestead. And maybe I just asked the tax department what their position is on that.
Jake Feldman, next permit, it's a policy choice. It creates some funny situations and potential loopholes. Like if you imagine like a fantastic gentleman farm and they have like an outbuilding that they use for like a pottery studio or something, then they report the pottery studio as a commercial use, and that would immediately change their entire land value into non-homestead, non-residential. So there's awkwardness there, I think.
And just to follow up too, though, what my understanding as well is if it's a homestead property and they have an Airbnb on it, the land all is in homestead rate, correct?
Sorry, repeat that.
Yeah, so if it's using a similar example, but not having it be a bakery, having it be your home.
Mhm.
And they had an Airbnb in it or, attached to it, whatever.
Yeah.
But the land would all be in the homestead rate.
Yeah, because we're not changing current law. That's current law.
I just wanted to.
No, it's all, I want us to keep on checking this.
Okay, thanks.
What's exciting is this is not gonna become. We still, once we pass this, we'll still have another year where we can find all the anomalies.
May not be here though. Chair.
Me either. Me either. Vaguely. Are you announcing something?
Yeah.
Are you?
Are you?
Never know.
Never know. Yeah. Yeah, Oregon voters could,
We're moving to Hawaii without.
Right finger to the vote. Yeah.
I think that the finished square footage is in here somewhere, right?
Okay.
Yep.
You can look at that again. There haven't been changes in this version, so we've gone past that, but we could revisit.
Is it finished in this?
100 square feet.
Oh, it's still silent.
Oh, can you be loud on that?
Maybe loud. You're asking to make the change to specify that basically the unfinished portion of a building would not
Count.
count.
Yes.
And
It
determining the
would,
tax
it would be, yeah.
And doing that because I believe that Jake, you flagged that you would like clarity on that.
I think we need it.
Okay, great.
I also think finished square feet is gonna be much more reliable.
Great.
Variable.
Okay.
There's a definition in statute somewhere of what finished means.
I don't know.
Yes,
Is there?
It's in the chip.
yes, because I found out that a poured concrete floor that isn't polished makes your house count as unfinished space. At least it used to. It was not intentional.
That was for,
I
that
found
was,
out after the fact.
that was for property valuation though?
For, well, whatever, for, yes,
It might not be in statute if it was for property valuations. That would be,
Okay.
that's different.
okay.
Um,
I don't think so.
Have a finished,
Just in
not
square
finished thing? Really? I remember a whole debate about that. Okay. Cool. Onwards.
the options would be to leave it undefined and leave it for tax to figure that out. Or to try to find an existing definition.
You try to find an existing definition, and if you can't have one, let us know. Thank you.
A little scared of using chip. There's controversy around, it, but
Legit.
a little bit. Okay.
I don't recall.
What gives,
I had no idea.
It's universally claimed, what am I talking about? So we have a repeal of the Act 61A transition data collection. That goes to what I was said before, where we're just doing repeal and replace for that transition language. So all of the classifications related things that have not already happened, such as the classification report, are repealed here, but this language, it will be replacing that. And we have a new section from tax on, from the tax department on, rate multipliers and intent. This actually is, the department had asked to add back in this contingency from Act 73. So this is a contingency that was in Act 73.
Did we take it out?
I think earlier drafts just,
Oh, okay.
you know,
So we just hadn't
the
included.
decision hadn't been made about contingencies, I think, and so some of them were left out. All at this point, I believe all of the possible contingencies have been added back,
I think
and
we should only pass statute for the rest of the biennium that is contingent on something.
make the whole section contingent on school
and
districts.
then we will do nothing.
You know? It was a joke, everyone. Just. Okay, great.
So this was one of the contingencies from Act 73, which is to make classifications, or this is just not even a contingency, actually. This is just an intent type language that you will reevaluate the tax rate multipliers in the future. And then here's the contingency, which is in order to ensure successful implementation of education finance reform. I should probably massage that because it's no longer set forth in this act now that we're taking out Act 73. But in the absence of legislative action on or before July 1, 2028, that creates a new tax rate multiplier. This is repealed. So this is saying you're still on that timeline that before July 1, 2028, you will set the multipliers. And the rest of the classifications is contingent on that. As a reminder, under the classifications report that the department put out, there are sections on rate multipliers. We haven't actually talked about that, but that exists.
And we're not going to change the rate multipliers until we have more information after we pass this. Representative Higley.
Madam Chair, so this is backing up to the rate multiplier. One of the big concerns I have with going down this road, not knowing in advance of what that might be. And I guess I'd just like to ask, what are the conditions that we're gonna look at to make that decision? I mean.
Excitingly, that's in the
why
report.
why couldn't we make it? I mean, we should know from the tax department a rough idea as to what that category, we got 2,000 Airbnbs now. I don't know if this is the ability, but again, that's a real conundrum for me to continue to go down this road and not have an idea as to what we're gonna be taxing.
So I believe the representative Wozniak also wants to set the rates now. I imagine you both want to set the rates differently from each other. But I don't want to speak for either of you. I personally feel that good tax policy means you don't set a rate until you know what the base is, and we don't know what the base is. And we're not gonna know what the base is until tax does a bunch more stuff. And if you're wondering sort of what we'll take into account, there is pretty clear parameters sort of hypothesized in the report that Jake wrote, and there's language in Act 73 about exactly what we will consider, and a second report from tax before we set the rates, and Kirby can show you that language.
Yeah, so Act 73 did give directions to tax, say, if we want to set this in a way that it pays for the property tax credit, the new version of that, what should it be? And they did that.
Right,
So,
that's in the
so,
report.
yeah, so you could check that out to get at least a tentative idea of what this might look like.
Thank you, I'd see it, yeah, so.
Okay.
And then there's a second report that comes next year or the year after. That's like a final sort of, it's like a second version of that. Right before we said it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Check back upon check back. Representative Wozniak? Or you didn't? Okay.
I have a last.
Rebecca, okay.
Can you help me understand what you see as how does changing tax classifications and taxing second homes differently? How does that support education finance reform?
How does it support what?
Education finance reform?
Why is that necessary to?
You mean, why is there a contingency? Because we exist in a political universe.
Say again, I'm sorry, Matt.
Because we exist in a political universe. That's the best answer I have for you.
This is.
Is there anything else in there? Is there anything else in the bill?
Effective dates. So the transition provisions take effect January 1, 2027, provided contingency school district boundaries.
Thank you.
And then we do have the language in here already, the Act 73 contingencies. So again, in multiple different places, if things don't move forward as intended, classification disappears. You probably don't need me to tell you that does not stop you from coming back again and doing, like, you know what I mean? It's like, you can keep coming back to the well, even if contingencies aren't met.
Representative Redding?
Well, I would have said that it was because we're trying to find a way to encourage voters to approve their school budgets. And by creating another grouping for property tax, which is where we get, what is it, 30 or 40% of our school funding? We put, I'm trying to understand this, not that I'm going to vote for it, but understanding what we would do. This would allow more money from a different source, because we create a different source to pour into the ed fund. That may or may not be political, but I think that's.
I think that is also a very good answer, yes. Perhaps more nuanced than mine.
Yeah.
It's not
Thank you.
just about money, it's about removing an incentive to hold houses vacant as hedges on the stock market in some places. I mean, I think we have policy that is disincentivizing housing right now, and our tax policy is disincentivizing housing in some areas. But what I worry about is that this is a three-legged dog or maybe a two-legged dog, and we're telling it to run faster. But if the leg is broken, then it can run. And I just hope we can either get somewhere or ask whether we're going to give up good tax policies.
And I think with
Goes way off into a tangent. on this one.
Very sad.
I think with that, we're gonna take a 5-minute break.
Good idea.